He purchased a slave simply to be a nanny for his motherless daughter. Yet when he discovered what she was doing secretly each night, his life changed forever. In 1853 America, at the height of antebellum prosperity, men of Southern high society resolved their domestic needs by buying slaves as if acquiring furniture. For plantation owners and wealthy merchants, hiring a slave nurse was a common and convenient practice. Colonel William Harrison Beaumont was desperate to find someone to care for his 3-year-old daughter after losing his wife during the birth of their second child. He purchased Catherine, a young slave of 25 years, expecting only that she would keep the girl fed and clean. Catherine harbored secrets extending far beyond her duties. What began as a strictly professional relationship transformed into something neither anticipated. When William discovered that each night Catherine was teaching his daughter something forbidden by law, something that could cost them both their freedom, it revealed a soul so extraordinary it made the colonel question everything he believed. When the truth of Catherine's past emerged, that she was not merely a common slave, but a woman with education rivaling his own, the ensuing scandal shook the foundations of Charleston society. The love that grew between them defied not only social conventions but the laws of the land. What happened when a powerful man discovered he had purchased not a servant but a teacher in disguise shows how true love can flourish in the most unlikely places, transforming lives forever. Tell me from which city you are hearing this story, and prepare to discover how a simple decision can change a family's destiny. Before we continue with this shocking story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment which city you're listening from. Let's strengthen our community so no one forgets these stories. Thank you, and let's continue. The slave market of Charleston, South Carolina, bustled on a humid September morning in 1853 when Colonel William Harrison Beaumont stepped from his carriage with a specific objective and a heavy heart. At 34 years old, he had become a widower just 4 months earlier when his beloved wife Elizabeth died from complications after childbirth. Their second child also did not survive. William surveyed the market with disgust and resignation. He had never personally purchased slaves, always delegating that duty to his overseers at his upriver cotton plantation. But the situation was desperate. His daughter Margaret, only 3, had cried incessantly since her mother's death. She refused to eat properly and had driven away 4 nurses consecutively with her difficult temperament. The child's grief manifested in tantrums, night terrors, and a stubborn refusal to accept comfort from anyone trying to replace her mother. The morning air was thick with harbor smells, salt and fish mixed with humanity packed too closely. William felt his stomach turn watching families separated, children clinging to their mothers, men inspected like livestock. He had grown up surrounded by slavery, had inherited slaves with his father's plantation, but had never personally participated in this transaction. His late wife, Elizabeth, had always handled domestic staff, and he had remained contentedly ignorant of the ugly details. "I need a young woman, healthy, experienced with small children," he told the trader, a rotund, sweaty man named Theodore Marsh, known throughout Charleston for his inventory of house servants. "And with infinite patience. My daughter is challenging. She's endured a terrible loss and needs someone gentle yet firm." "I have exactly what your honor seeks," Theodore replied, his piggy eyes lighting up at a significant sale prospect. He led William through the market to a reserved area where more expensive merchandise was kept, away from common field hands and dock workers. A prime piece, young, strong, very clean, came from a Virginia plantation where she cared for the master's children. Light-skinned, refined features, knows how to conduct herself in a gentleman's home. Worth every penny. Among women sitting on wooden benches, William saw one who stood out, not only for her beauty but for her posture. While others kept eyes downcast in submission, this woman observed everything with an alert intelligence that intrigued him immediately. Something in her bearing suggested she had not been born to this station, though he couldn't quite identify why. Catherine was 25, with light brown skin the color of caramel, black wavy hair in a simple braid over one shoulder, and hazel eyes guarding deep secrets. She wore a faded, mended blue cotton dress, remarkably clean given the circumstances. Her hands, William noticed, were delicate and well cared for, not calloused from field or heavy labor. Her nails were trimmed and neat. Her movements were graceful, suggesting education in deportment. "This is Catherine," said Theodore with the practiced patter of a man who had sold hundreds of human beings. 25 years old, healthy as a horse, no vices, excellent with children, very obedient. Trained in a good Virginia household, knows all the proper ways, can cook if needed, but her specialty is caring for little ones. The family that owned her fell on hard times, had to sell. "Their loss is your gain, Colonel." William approached, and Catherine raised her eyes to meet his. For an instant, he felt she could read his soul, as if those hazel eyes could see past his fine clothes and respected name to the grief and desperation within. There was a depth in that gaze that unsettled him, an intelligence inappropriate for someone in her position. Slaves were supposed to be simple, uneducated, incapable of such penetrating observation. "You have experience caring for small children?" he asked her directly, breaking protocol by addressing her rather than only the trader. "Yes, sir," Catherine responded in a soft but firm voice carrying a cultured accent he couldn't place, neither the thick dialect of field slaves nor the affected speech of house servants imitating their masters. "I have cared for many children over the years, from infancy through early education." William noticed how she phrased her response, not just confirming experience but providing additional information. Most slaves would have simply said yes or no. "Difficult children," he pressed. "Who cry a lot, won't eat, children who have lost their mothers." He saw something flicker in her eyes, a shadow of pain suggesting personal experience with loss. "Yes, sir," she said softly. "Children who are grieving require special care. They need patience, consistency, and someone who understands their behavior is not defiance, but pain finding its way out." The observation was so perceptive, so aligned with what the doctor had said about Margaret, that William felt his breath catch. He stared, trying to understand how a slave could articulate what he himself had struggled to comprehend. "How did you know?" he asked quietly, forgetting Theodore was listening. "How did you know about my daughter's situation?" "By the way you speak of the girl, sir," Catherine said gently, "and by the sadness in your eyes. A man doesn't come to purchase a nurse with such urgency unless his need is desperate, and that desperation usually comes from love and loss combined." Theodore shifted uncomfortably, clearly displeased with his merchandise speaking so freely. "Now, Catherine, just answer the gentleman's questions without extra words," he said sharply. But William held up a hand. "No, let her speak." He looked at Catherine intently. "You understand grief? You've seen it in children before." "I've seen it in many forms, sir. In children who've lost parents, in parents who've lost children. Grief is grief, whether it wears fine clothes or rags." The philosophical response, delivered with simple dignity, moved something in William's chest. This was no ordinary slave. However she had come to be on this auction block, there was something extraordinary about her. Theodore, sensing the sale moving in his favor, pressed his advantage. "As you see, Colonel, she's well-spoken and understands quality care. A girl like this will fit right into your household, cause no trouble, and give your daughter exactly what she needs." "How much?" William asked, still looking at Catherine. $800. "I know that seems steep, but for a skilled nurse of her quality, trained in a proper household, it's more than fair. I could get 1,000 easily from a family on Trad Street. But I like to see my merchandise go to good homes where they'll be appreciated." It was a high price, nearly double a field hand's cost, significantly more than most house servants. But William was desperate, and something about Catherine spoke to him on a level he couldn't articulate. Perhaps it was hope that this unusual woman might succeed where others had failed. Perhaps it was simple desperation. Or perhaps something else, not yet ready to be named. "I'll pay it," he said. "Have your man draw up the papers." Theodore's face split into a broad smile. "Excellent choice, Colonel. I guarantee you won't regret it. Catherine will serve you well." An hour later, William led Catherine to his carriage, her few possessions tied in a small cloth bundle. As they walked, Catherine kept her eyes forward, spine straight despite the degradation. William noticed how other slaves seemed to defer to her, how even here she carried a quiet dignity commanding respect. The carriage waited on East Bay Street. William's driver, James, a slave with the Beaumont family for 20 years, raised his eyebrows but said nothing, nodding respectfully as William handed Catherine into the carriage. During the ride to William's King Street mansion in Charleston's fashionable district south of Broad, William explained the situation further. The carriage rolled through elegant streets lined with palmetto trees and ornate iron gates, past gracious homes of the elite. "My daughter Margaret is 3, he began, watching Catherine's face. She lost her mother 4 months ago during childbirth. My wife Elizabeth developed a fever after delivery and didn't survive. The child, a son, lived only 2 days." His voice caught slightly. "Since then, Margaret has been inconsolable. She cries for hours, refuses to eat more than a few bites, wakes screaming from nightmares. We've had 4 nurses. The first 2 she wore down with constant tears and demands. The third lost her temper and struck Margaret when she wouldn't stop crying. I dismissed her immediately. The 4th left yesterday saying she couldn't bear the strain. The child is testing them," Catherine said thoughtfully. "When children lose a parent, especially their mother, they often become difficult as a way of testing whether new caregivers will also abandon them. Each time a nurse leaves, it confirms Margaret's fear that everyone she loves will disappear." William stared. "That's exactly what Dr. Peaton said." "How do you know this?" "I've cared for children in mourning before, sir. The patterns are similar regardless of circumstances." "You said earlier the father must be considered too. What did you mean?" Catherine hesitated, weighing how much honesty she could afford. Children are sensitive to adults' emotions. If Margaret sees her father also grieving, if she senses his sadness and perhaps his difficulty caring for her while managing his own pain, she may react to that as much as her mother's absence. Sometimes children act out because they don't know how else to express that they see their parents suffering. The insight cut to William's heart. He had tried to maintain composure, to be strong for Margaret, but suppressing his own grief while comforting her had been exhausting. At night, alone in the bedroom he'd shared with Elizabeth, he wept, but before Margaret and staff, he maintained the stoic facade expected of a Southern gentleman. "You seem to understand a great deal about the human heart," he said quietly. "Where did you learn such things?" "Life teaches many things, sir," Catherine replied, looking out the window. "Loss is a universal teacher." They rode in silence before William spoke again. "You'll be responsible for all Margaret's care, feeding, bathing, dressing, entertaining, putting her to bed. The household is managed by Mrs. Beatrice Thornton, our housekeeper for 15 years. She runs a tight ship and expects high standards. You'll take meals in the servants' dining room and report concerns about Margaret directly to Mrs. Thornton, not me." "Will I be permitted to take Margaret outside to the garden or for walks?" The question surprised him. Most slaves wouldn't presume to ask about duties but wait to be told. "Yes, of course. Fresh air and exercise are important. Our garden is secure and private. And if Margaret needs something, clothing, books, or toys, how shall I communicate that?" "Books?" William repeated. "You think she needs books? She's only 3. Children are never too young for stories, sir. And if she's learning to speak well, picture books can help develop vocabulary." Again, William was surprised by Catherine's insight. "I'll see you have appropriate materials for her care and education." When they arrived at the mansion, Catherine stepped down and looked up at the impressive 3-story structure with tall columns and wide piazzas. The house, of Charleston grey brick with white trim, was surrounded by elaborate gardens enclosed by iron fencing. William watched her face, expecting the almost slave showed at such wealth. Instead, Catherine's expression was thoughtful, analytical, as if cataloguing the household rather than being overwhelmed. Mrs. Beatrice Thornton waited in the entrance hall, a tall woman with iron grey hair in a severe bun and sharp blue eyes missing nothing. She looked Catherine up and down with skepticism. "This is Catherine," William said. "She'll care for Margaret. Please show her to the prepared quarters, then bring Margaret to meet her. I'll be in my study if needed." "Yes, sir," Mrs. Thornton said crisply. She turned to Catherine. "Follow me." As William climbed to his second-floor study, he heard Mrs. Thornton's voice echoing in the stairwell. "I run a proper household here. Cleanliness, punctuality, and obedience are expected. The Colonel is a good master but won't tolerate laziness or insubordination. Do you understand?" "Yes," Catherine responded, clear and respectful but not servile. William hoped Catherine wouldn't be cowed by Mrs. Thornton's severity. The housekeeper was efficient and loyal but ruled domestic staff with an iron hand, with little patience for weakness or sentiment. Catherine's room was on the second floor near Margaret's nursery, small but comfortable by servant standards, a narrow bed with a simple quilt, a chest of drawers, a washstand with pitcher and basin, and a chair near the window overlooking the back garden with its roses and old oak tree. "This is your room," Mrs. Thornton said. "Keep it neat. Inspection every Saturday morning. Meals are at 6 a.m., noon, and 6 p.m. in the servants' dining room. You'll eat with other house staff. Miss Margaret takes meals in the nursery. You're responsible for ensuring she eats properly. Her clothes are in her room's wardrobe. She has a bath every evening before bed. Any questions? May I ask Miss Margaret's routine? When does she wake? Nap? Her preferences for food and play." Mrs. Thornton's expression softened slightly. "She wakes early, usually by 6. She used to nap after lunch, but lately fights sleep and often cries herself to exhaustion by mid-afternoon. She picks at food, especially vegetables. She used to enjoy dolls and picture books with her mother. But since Mrs. Beaumont passed, she's shown little interest in toys." The housekeeper's voice held sadness. "She was such a happy child before. Now she seems lost." "I'll do my best to help her find her way back," Catherine said gently. "See that you do. The Colonel loves that child more than anything. If you ease her suffering, you'll have his eternal gratitude." After Mrs. Thornton left to fetch Margaret, Catherine stood alone in her room. She walked to the window, looking at the garden, taking deep breaths. 3 years since my kidnapping. 3 years hiding who I am. 3 years of degradation and fear. And now I'm here in this beautiful house, charged with caring for a motherless child. Perhaps, she thought, this was where her luck might finally turn. She heard small footsteps in the hall with Mrs. Thornton's heavier tread. Catherine turned from the window, straightening her spine to meet her new charge. Margaret was tiny, smaller than expected for 3. She had blonde curly hair carefully combed but already coming loose from ribbons, enormous blue eyes dominating her small, pale face. The child was thin, with dark circles under her eyes from sleepless nights. She wore a beautiful white dress with blue embroidery, hanging loosely, clutching a worn rag doll with one hand, the other firmly holding Mrs. Thornton's skirt. "Miss Margaret, this is Catherine," Mrs. Thornton said gently. "She's come to take care of you." Margaret stared with solemn, suspicious eyes. Her lower lip trembled as if preparing to cry. Catherine knelt slowly to the child's eye level, not approaching or touching, simply smiling softly. "Hello, Margaret. My name is Catherine. I came to be your friend." Margaret didn't respond, pressing more firmly against Mrs. Thornton's leg, eyes never leaving Catherine's face. "You have very beautiful eyes," Catherine continued softly. "They're the color of the sky on a clear summer day. I bet your mama told you that. I bet she said you had the prettiest eyes she ever saw." At the mention of her mother, Margaret's face crumpled, tears streaming. Mrs. Thornton looked alarmed, but Catherine did something unexpected. She began singing softly, a melody from another world. The words were in an unrecognizable African language, ancient and achingly beautiful, full of longing and comfort. Margaret's sobs quieted. She loosened her grip on Mrs. Thornton's skirt, taking a half step forward, eyes wide and fixed on Catherine's face. Tears still flowed silently, as if the music had given her grief a gentler expression. When the song ended, the room was silent except for Margaret's shaky breathing. The child had moved closer without realizing it. That was beautiful, Mrs. Thornton said quietly. I've never heard anything like it. William's voice came from the doorway. What language was that? Catherine turned, startled. She hadn't heard him approach. He stood with an expression of wonder. An African lullaby, sir, she said, rising. My mother taught me when I was small. It speaks of stars watching over sleeping children, protecting them through the night. You speak African? Some words and phrases, sir. My mother came from Africa originally and remembered old songs. William looked at his daughter, still staring at Catherine with rapt attention, the first interest she'd shown in weeks beyond her grief. Margaret, sweetheart, he said gently, crouching beside her. Do you like Catherine singing? Margaret nodded slowly. Would you like her to stay and take care of you? To sing and play with you? Another small nod. William felt something loosen in his chest, a tiny seed of hope. Catherine, would you mind staying with Margaret this afternoon? I think she's comfortable with you. Of course, sir. I'd be honored. In the following days, William observed Catherine with growing fascination. She moved through the household with quiet efficiency, her focus entirely on Margaret. The transformation was gradual but unmistakable. Constant crying diminished. Margaret began eating more, still picking but enough to ease William's worries. Night terrors continued, but Catherine had a gift for soothing her back to sleep. William would wake sometimes to hear that strange, beautiful African melody floating through the house and know Catherine was singing Margaret out of a nightmare. More remarkably, Margaret began smiling again, small, fleeting, fragile smiles, but real. She laughed during breakfast. She played with dolls while Catherine sewed. She asked about garden flowers as Catherine walked with her among roses. William watched with relief and gratitude, but also growing puzzlement. Catherine was unlike any slave he'd known. Her speech too refined, knowledge too broad, manner too confident. She never overstepped boundaries, always addressed him and Mrs. Thornton with respect, but something in her bearing suggested she was playing a role rather than living her natural state. He noticed little things, how she held a book when looking at picture books with Margaret, as if reading rather than just looking at illustrations, the grace of her movements, more like a lady than a servant, her vocabulary, words like consistency, temperament, anxiety, beyond what a slave would know, her posture always upright, hands always clean and well-kept despite work. One afternoon, about 3 weeks after Catherine's arrival, William heard voices from the garden while working in his study. He went to the window and saw Catherine and Margaret on a blanket under the oak tree. Margaret was laughing, actually laughing, a sound William feared he might never hear again. Catherine was helping her make clover flower chains, heads bent together. "You're a quick learner, Miss Margaret," Catherine said clearly in the quiet air. "See how you make the loop and thread the next stem through. That's the way. You could be a fine seamstress one day if you wished. Or make beautiful things just for joy. Will you always stay with me?" Margaret asked plaintively. "Will you be my mamma now?" William's breath caught. He leaned closer, desperate to hear Catherine's response. "I'll stay with you as long as your papa wishes me to," Catherine said gently. "I can't be your mamma because you already have a mamma in heaven watching over you. But I can be your friend, teacher, and someone who loves you very much. Would that be all right?" "I suppose," Margaret said. "But I wish you could be my mamma too. Then you'd never leave. People we love don't really leave us, sweetheart. They live in our hearts. Your mamma will always be part of you, in your pretty eyes, kind heart, and curiosity about the world. And I promise as long as I'm with you, I'll take care of you, teach you, and help you grow into the wonderful person you're meant to be." William felt tears prick his eyes. This woman, this slave whose name he barely knew, was giving his daughter something precious beyond measure, permission to grieve while offering hope for the future. She wasn't trying to replace Elizabeth but helping Margaret learn to live with her loss. That evening, after Margaret slept, William asked Mrs. Thornton about Catherine's behavior. "She's exceptional, sir," the housekeeper said. I've never seen anyone connect with a child so quickly. Miss Margaret hasn't cried during the day for nearly a week. She eats vegetables when Catherine tells stories about how food helps us grow strong. She goes to bed without fuss. It's remarkable. What do you know about Catherine's background? Where she came from before? Mrs. Thornton shrugged. Only what the trader told you, sir. From Virginia, trained in a good household. Why do you ask? Does she seem like other slaves to you? The housekeeper paused. Now that you mention it, sir, no. She speaks quite well, better than many white women of my acquaintance, honestly, and has a way about her, a dignity that's unusual. But she works hard, causes no trouble, so I've no complaints. Have you seen her reading? Reading, sir? Mrs. Thornton looked shocked. Certainly not. That would be illegal. Why would you think? Just a question, William said quickly. She seems educated, that's all. Well, slaves sometimes pick up refined ways from their masters. Perhaps that's all. But William didn't think that was all. Over the next days, he paid closer attention, and his conviction deepened that Catherine was hiding something significant. She was too knowledgeable. When Margaret asked about birds, Catherine identified species and habits. When Margaret wondered about stars, Catherine explained constellations with precision, suggesting formal education. She occasionally spoke French phrases, translating as if teaching a foreign language were natural. Then, 2 weeks later, William discovered the truth in a way that left him shaken. It was a warm October evening. William worked late in his study on plantation correspondence. The house was quiet, servants retired, Margaret long asleep. Needing a ledger from the third-floor library, he climbed the stairs and heard a soft voice from Margaret's room. It was Catherine's voice, not singing or storytelling, but speaking in a measured instructional tone that chilled his blood. This is the letter A, Margaret. It makes the sound UARTH like in apple, or A like in able. And this is B, which makes the sound booth like in ball or book. William moved silently to Margaret's slightly ajar door. Through the gap, he saw Catherine sitting on Margaret's bed with the child nestled against her. Between them was a primer, and Catherine was systematically teaching Margaret letters and sounds. Teaching a slave to read was illegal throughout the South, punishable by fines and imprisonment. Teaching any enslaved person to read and write was considered dangerous, a path to rebellion. More shocking than the illegality was that Catherine obviously knew how to read, and read well. She wasn't stumbling but moving through the primer with the confidence and skill of an experienced teacher. William stood frozen, watching as Catherine patiently guided Margaret's small finger from letter to letter, asking questions, offering praise. His mind raced with questions and implications. How had a slave learned to read so well? Where had she received such education? Why risk severe punishment to teach his daughter? He watched for perhaps 10 minutes before silently retreating to his study. He closed the door, sitting with trembling hands. He should confront her immediately, summon authorities. Teaching slaves to read wasn't just illegal but a threat to the social order. If word got out he harbored a literate slave teaching his daughter, his reputation would be destroyed. But even as these thoughts ran through his mind, William couldn't muster appropriate outrage. Instead, he felt awe and curiosity. Who was Catherine really? How had she acquired such education? What kind of extraordinary woman would risk everything to teach a 3-year-old? He didn't sleep that night. He sat in his study, thinking about everything observed over past weeks, Catherine's refined speech, knowledge of history, science, languages, graceful movements, proper posture, ability to connect with Margaret, suggesting not just experience with children but genuine education in pedagogy. None fit her supposed background as a slave trained in a Virginia household. By morning, William had decided. He would confront Catherine privately, demand the truth. If she'd lied about her past, he needed to know, but he'd hear her out before deciding action. He waited until afternoon when Margaret napped. He asked Mrs. Thornton to ensure they wouldn't be disturbed and summoned Catherine to his study. She entered with usual composure, though he detected a hint of apprehension. She stood before his desk, hands folded, posture perfect, waiting. "Catherine," he began, deciding to be direct. "I need to ask questions, and I need honest answers." "Yes, sir," she said steadily. "Where were you born?" "In Maryland, sir." "Which plantation?" "I wasn't born on a plantation, sir. I was born in Baltimore." The answer was unexpected. Slaves weren't generally born in cities unless mothers were house servants for urban families. "Your mother's name?" "Sarah Mitchell." "And your father?" Catherine hesitated a moment. "James Mitchell." "They were both slaves." "No, sir." William leaned forward, pulse quickening. "What were they?" "They were free people of color, sir." The room seemed to spin. "You're telling me you were born free?" "Yes, sir." Then how, he couldn't finish, but Catherine understood. "I was kidnapped, sir, 3 years ago. My parents had died, I was living alone in Baltimore. Men came at night, claimed my father owed them money. They destroyed my freedom papers and sold me to a trader who falsified documents saying I was born a slave. I've been sold for time since, passed from place to place before ending in Charleston." William felt as if the floor dropped. If true, if she were born free, then he hadn't purchased a slave at all. He'd purchased a free woman illegally enslaved. The implications were staggering. "Can you prove any of this?" "My documents were destroyed. My house burned. Anyone who knew my family is in Baltimore, and who would believe them against white men with legal papers, false though they are?" "How did you learn to read?" "My father taught me. He was a skilled carpenter, respected in the free-colored community. He believed education essential. I can read and write English and French. I studied mathematics, history, geography. He wanted me to support myself, never be dependent." "I saw you teaching Margaret last night," William said quietly. "With the primer." Catherine's face paled. "Sir, do you know what could happen if reported?" "To both of us?" "Yes, sir, I know. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have presumed. It's just Margaret's so bright, eager to learn, and it seemed wrong to let her mind lie fallow when she could develop it. But I understand if you must punish me. I accept consequences." She stood with perfect dignity, ready for judgment. In that moment, William realized everything made sense now. She wasn't a slave trying to act free. She was a free person forced into slavery. And even under that burden, her true nature shone. "Catherine," he said slowly, "if true, if you were born free, then you're held illegally. I purchased you under false pretenses." "That's correct, sir." "Why not say something when I bought you? Would you have believed me? A colored woman in a slave market claiming free? Mr. Marsh had legal documents, false though they were. I had nothing but my word. She was right, of course. In the South social and legal structure, a slave's testimony was worthless against a white man's documents. "I need time to think," William said. "This is more complex than I can process immediately." "I understand, sir. May I ask what you intend?" "I don't know yet." "But Catherine," he looked at her intently. "I want the truth. All of it. Exactly what happened, who you were, how you ended here. Can you tell me?" "Yes, sir. If you truly want to know, I'll tell everything. Come back tonight after Margaret sleeps. We'll talk privately." Catherine nodded and left. William sat alone, thoughts churning. If Catherine's story true, he had an enormous decision. He could ignore it, continue keeping her as a slave, no one the wiser. He could report her literacy, have her sold away, removing the problem. Or he could investigate her claims and, if proven true, help recover her freedom. The last would cost him $800, deprive Margaret of her best caregiver. It would also be right. That night, after household settled and Margaret slept, Catherine came to his study. William had prepared a fire against evening chill, 2 chairs arranged for face-to-face conversation rather than across his desk. "Sit," he said, gesturing. "Tell me your story." "All." Catherine sat, took a deep breath, and began. "My father James Mitchell was born a slave on a tobacco plantation in southern Maryland. When he was 25, his master died and, in his will, manumitted several slaves including my father. He was a talented carpenter and used his skills to build a good life. He moved to Baltimore, established himself as a craftsman, furniture, construction, built a reputation for quality and reliability." She paused, eyes distant with memory. "My mother Sarah was born free. Her parents purchased their freedom years before she was born. She worked as a seamstress, known for beautiful work. My parents met at church, married, and I was born in 1828. They named me Catherine after my grandmother." "You were educated from childhood?" William asked. "Yes. My father insisted. He said slavery stole his childhood and youth, and he was determined I'd have every advantage. He hired a tutor when I was 5. By 10, I could read English and French, do mathematics through algebra, knew history and geography as well as any white child in a good school." "What happened to your parents?" Pain flashed across Catherine's face. "My mother died of consumption when I was 20. My father never recovered. He continued working, but his heart was broken. 2 years later, in 1850, he was killed in a construction accident. A wall collapsed and crushed him." "I'm sorry," William said, meaning it. "He left me our house, his tools, some savings. Not a fortune, but enough to live modestly. I supported myself with needlework and teaching reading and writing to children in the free colored community. I had a small but good life. Not wealthy, but free and independent. That was everything." "What happened 3 years ago?" "2 men came to my door one August night. They said my father owed them money, gambling debts, they claimed. I told them impossible, my father didn't gamble. They insisted. They said I'd have to work off his debts. When I refused and showed his papers proving no debts, they became violent. They beat me, tied me, burned my house. Everything, my father's papers, my freedom certificate, my mother's Bible, destroyed." Her voice remained steady, but William saw pain in her eyes. "They kept me locked in a cellar for weeks while arranging false papers saying I was born a slave named Catherine, no surname, born 1828 in Virginia. They sold me to a trader who took me south. I tried telling the truth at first, but no one listened. A colored woman's word meant nothing against white men with legal documents. I was beaten for lying, for trying to escape, for being difficult. Eventually, I learned silence, waiting for opportunity." "But you never stopped being who you were," William observed. "No. They could take my freedom, not my mind, education, or sense of self. I hid it best I could, spoke simply, kept eyes down, acted the part expected. But inside, I was still Catherine Mitchell, daughter of James and Sarah, a free woman of Baltimore. I just couldn't prove it." William sat back, trying to imagine her endurance, 3 years forced servitude, hiding true self, living in fear of discovery and punishment, yet maintaining dignity and core identity. "Why teach Margaret to read?" he asked. "You knew it was dangerous." "Because she's bright, and because education is something no one can take. If I've learned anything, circumstances change instantly. Wealth vanishes, freedom stolen, security illusion. But knowledge once gained remains. I wanted to give Margaret something hers no matter the future." She hesitated. "And because it gave me joy to teach again, to use my mind and skills for proper purpose. For a few minutes each night teaching Margaret letters, I wasn't a slave. I was a teacher, the person my parents raised. A small rebellion perhaps, but important." William stood, walked to the window looking at the dark garden. He stood a long moment, thinking about everything she'd told him, weighing options and responsibilities. Catherine, he finally said, turning to face her. I'll investigate your story. I'll write to people in Baltimore, search for records, find evidence supporting what you've said. If true, I'll help recover your freedom. You have my word. Tears sprang to her eyes for the first time since he'd known her. Do you mean that, sir? I do. I can't undo injustice done to you, but I can refuse to perpetuate it. If born free, you should be free. Thank you, she whispered. You can't know what that means. Meanwhile, continue caring for Margaret, continue teaching her to read, but discreetly. If anyone asks, you're simply looking at picture books. Understand? Yes, sir. Catherine, I need ask something else. When free, what will you do? Where go? She looked at him with clear hazel eyes. I don't know, sir. No family left, no home. Baltimore holds painful memories. I suppose find some way to support myself, teaching or needlework. And Margaret? What about her? Pain crossed Catherine's face. I'll miss her terribly. She's become like a daughter. But I can't ask you to keep me as an employee when free. Social complications would be, she trailed off. Would you want to stay if possible? More than anything. But sir, surely you see how impossible, a free woman of color in your household. The scandal, and Margaret's future to consider. She needs to grow up part of Charleston society, not as daughter of a man employing a colored woman. Let me worry about society. You worry about Margaret. She loves you, Catherine. Losing you would devastate her after all she's lost. And I love her. But love doesn't always determine what's possible. William wanted to say more, to tell her he was beginning to realize his feelings went beyond gratitude, beyond respect for her intelligence and strength. But it was too soon, too complicated, too dangerous. Instead, he simply nodded. Get some rest. We'll speak more after I investigate. Over the next 6 weeks, William devoted considerable time and resources investigating Catherine's story. He wrote to Baltimore officials, churches keeping records of free colored people, carpenters' guilds that might have known James Mitchell. He hired a private investigator to search records and interview people in Baltimore's free colored community. Responses came slowly but came. Yes, James Mitchell had been a respected Baltimore carpenter. Yes, he'd been a freed slave who built a successful business. Yes, he'd married Sarah Washington in 1825. Yes, they had a daughter Catherine born 1828. Yes, his house burned August 1850, shortly after his death, though assumed accidental. Yes, his daughter Catherine disappeared around that time, assumed perished in the fire. With documentation spread before him, William knew beyond doubt Catherine had told truth. She was a free woman, illegally enslaved, and he'd unknowingly purchased stolen property. The legal situation was complex. Simply freeing Catherine wouldn't restore her legitimate freeborn status. She'd need proper documentation, proof of birth status, legal recognition of fraud perpetrated against her. William consulted a lawyer with progressive views, swearing him to secrecy. It can be done, the lawyer said, but will take time and money. We'll need to file documents in Maryland courts, get testimony from people who knew her family, prove slave papers fraudulent. Could take months, maybe a year. Do it, William said. Whatever it takes. While legal process ground forward, life in the Beaumont household continued. Margaret thrived under Catherine's care, growing stronger and happier each week. The child's grief hadn't disappeared but became manageable, woven into daily life rather than overwhelming. She spoke often of her mother, asking Catherine about heaven and angels, working through understanding death with Catherine's patient explanations. And every night, Catherine taught Margaret to read. By November, Margaret recognized all letters. By December, she sounded simple words. By January, reading basic sentences from primer. Remarkable progress for such a young child, testament to both Margaret's intelligence and Catherine's teaching skill. William found himself drawn more to Catherine's company. He invented reasons to observe her lessons, sitting quietly in nursery corners. He engaged her in conversations about Margaret's development, discussions broadening into education, philosophy, literature, politics. He discovered she was as knowledgeable and thoughtful as any educated person he knew, with opinions on everything from Wordsworth's poetry to European politics. He realized he was falling in love with her sometime around Christmas. Not just her beauty or intelligence, but the totality of who she was, strength sustained through unimaginable hardship, kindness shown his daughter, quiet dignity carried even in degrading slavery. But he said nothing. Social barriers were enormous. Even legally free, she'd still be a woman of color in the slave-holding South, he a white man of planter class. A romantic relationship would be scandalous, potentially dangerous for both, certainly damaging to Margaret's future prospects. So he remained silent, watching, waiting, wondering if feelings he saw reflected in Catherine's eyes were real or wishful thinking. In March 1854, 6 months after Catherine arrived, legal documents finally came. Catherine Mitchell, freeborn woman of color, officially recognized by Maryland courts as illegally enslaved. Fraudulent documents nullified. Freedom restored. William arranged a small courthouse ceremony in Charleston with his lawyer and Mrs. Thornton as witnesses. Catherine stood before a judge, received freedom papers proving her free status. Walking out, she was no one's property. She belonged to herself. That evening, William asked to speak privately in his study. She came dressed simply but cleanly, freedom papers clutched as if fearing they might disappear. "How do you feel?" William asked. Terrified, she admitted. "For 3 years I dreamed of this moment. Now it's here, I realize I've no idea what to do next. You could stay, and not as slave, obviously, but as Margaret's governess. I'd pay salary, provide good quarters, respect your free status. Continue teaching Margaret, live here in safety and comfort." "Why would you do that?" Catherine asked softly. "You know scandal employing a free woman of color." "Because Margaret needs you." "Because," he hesitated, then risked honesty. "Because I've come to value your presence in this house, in my life, more than I can easily express. Because thought of you leaving is unbearable." Catherine looked at him a long moment. "William," she said, using his first name. "I need be honest. I've developed feelings for you beyond gratitude. When near you, my heart races. When you speak, I hang on every word. I think of you constantly. But feelings don't change reality. Even if I stay as employee, society will judge harshly. If we acted on feelings, consequences severe." "I know," William said. "I've thought of little else for months. Social barriers real and significant. But Catherine, I'm in love with you. Completely, hopelessly. And I think you love me too." "I do," she whispered. "God help me, I do. But love isn't enough. What if we made it enough? What if decided our happiness matters more than social approval? And Margaret? Her future? If you marry a colored woman, her prospects destroyed. She'll be ostracized, mocked, made suffer for your choice." William had thought extensively. "Or she'll learn love and justice matter more than prejudice. She'll grow in a household valuing character over skin color, education over empty social pretensions. She'll be stronger." "You're asking me be brave enough marry you," Catherine said. "But are you brave enough face what that means? Loss of friends, business partnerships destroyed, social standing ruined. I'd rather be ruined with you than respected without." Catherine closed eyes, tears streaming. "This is madness. Impossible. Then let's be mad and impossible together." She opened eyes, looked at him. "If we do this, no going back. Once you marry me, Charleston society never accepts you. Then we'll find new society. Progressive communities in the North, places interracial couples live in relative peace. We could move, start fresh somewhere Margaret grow without slavery's poison. You'd give up plantation, heritage, everything. I'd give up anything for you and Margaret. You've both become my whole world." Catherine moved toward him, closing distance. She reached up, touched his face gently. "Then yes. Yes, I'll marry you, not because makes sense or easy, but because I love you, and life too short deny love when found." William pulled her into his arms, kissed her. In that moment, impossible became real. They married quietly 3 months later in June 1854, a small ceremony performed by an abolitionist minister in a private home. Margaret, now 4, thrilled having Catherine officially her new mother. Mrs. Thornton witnessed, having come to love Catherine like a daughter, respecting William's courage following Hart. Charleston society's reaction swift and brutal. Friends cut contact. Business partners withdrew. Social invitations stopped. William's name removed from club lists. Editorials condemned him. Sermons preached against interracial marriage degradation. Anonymous threats delivered. But unexpected allies emerged. Progressive families with abolitionist sympathies reached support. Some business contacts proved loyal. Slowly, carefully, they built new life not depending on Charleston's approval. True to word, William eventually sold plantation, moved family north to Philadelphia, where laws against interracial marriage not enforced, and a free colored woman married to a white man could live without constant fear. There Margaret grew confident, educated, fluent 3 languages, passionate social justice, unafraid challenge injustice. Years later, grown Margaret married a progressive lawyer sharing her values, would tell about her unusual family. "My father bought a slave to care for me after mother died. But discovered bought not servant but teacher, not property but person extraordinary gifts. He had courage admit error, correct injustice, follow heart when society condemned. My mother lost freedom to cruelty and greed but never lost herself." Together, parents built family-based love and respect rather than law and custom. They taught human dignity matters more than social approval, love sees beyond color, courage means doing right even when costs everything. Catherine and William's story became one told when needing believe love triumph over prejudice, individuals stand against unjust systems, families built genuine affection and respect stronger than social convention. On quiet evenings when house still and Margaret asleep, Catherine would sometimes take freedom papers, read them, still hardly believing real. William would watch, marveling this extraordinary woman came into his life unlikely way. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked once. Difficulties faced, losses endured. Catherine looked with clear hazel eyes first captivated him Charleston slave market years before. "I regret injustice bringing us together," she said. "Regret years lost slavery. But not regret loving you, family built, life made despite everything against us. What we have worth every struggle." That truth sustained them through every difficulty, challenge, moment society's disapproval threatened crush them. They found rare, precious love built mutual respect, shared values, courage stand together against worlds saying they should apart. Years later, historians looking at antebellum period find many stories slavery's cruelty and injustice. But also occasional stories like Catherine and William's, proving even darkest times, individuals choose humanity over hate, love over law, justice over convenience. These stories matter not because common but because show possible when people courage live deepest values rather than society's shallowest prejudices. So Catherine Mitchell Beaumont, born free, stolen slavery, freed again love and justice, lived see slavery end America. Lived see daughter become women's suffrage leader. Lived teach hundreds children, black and white, in school established Philadelphia. Lived grow old beside man brave enough see her humanity when law said property, choose love when society demanded choose status. Their story reminds freedom not just legal status but state of being, love flourish unlikely circumstances, courage do right even at great personal cost foundation true progress. In world tried reduce Catherine property, William's social position, they chose instead be fully human, fully themselves, fully committed building life deepest values. That choice, made moment courage 1854 Charleston, echoed forward generations, touching everyone heard story dared believe they too choose love over fear, justice over convenience, hope over despair. Tell me from which city hearing this story and which part touched heart most. What moves most about stories where people fight injustice for love? Leave like if William and Catherine's story reached soul. Subscribe, more stories show true love transform lives and societies. Because all deserve believe humanity worth more than any label society places.